welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to go over one of my favorite tools, the Zonal Statistics tool, which helps us extract information from rasters as fields in a vector dataset. So here I have census places, which are town locations, and let's say I want to start extracting some information about the environment that they're in to the census place boundaries as fields. Maybe I want to know average elevation and average slope and some other information that is commonly stored in raster datasets. Well, I can use the spatial analyst tools and the zonal toolset to answer that question. And in this case, I'll use zonal statistics as table. And what it's going to do is if I provide the zone data, and I'll give it the zone field of object ID, I'll explain that in just a sec, and the value raster of the digital elevation model, what it's going to do is it's going to loop through all the features in this feature zone data that I'm providing. And for every feature in there, it's going to run a set of statistics that I'm going to specify down here. And it'll write out those statistics as fields in an attribute table, and it will attach this zone ID so that I can then join that attribute table back in to my census places data here. So I'll call this census place elevation, and I'm going to do all statistics here where it calculates a number of things. It calculates the minimum, maximum, and mean, as well as the range and standard deviation and the sum for me, and then I have some shortcuts down here to subset it. For categorical rasters, I get some other options here. So I get variety and a few other things that it can only do for categorical rasters. So let's run it to see it in action. I'll click OK, and usually it's just super fast. So it's done, and it output a table here. And if I go look at the table, I have an area, min, max, a range, and standard deviation, and then the mean and the sum, as I said, for every object ID. And so I have the object ID of this table, and then here's the object ID of the features that it corresponds to. So I need to be aware of that when I'm joining it back in. And if I take this, and I go to joins and relates, join, it selects the census place elevation table for me, since it's the only table that I can join to here. And I'll select object ID here. And I need to be careful because the object ID field in the output table isn't necessarily the same values. It's this one that's from the original table. And I'm going to keep all records, click OK. And now if I go to the attribute table for the census places, I, at the end here, have all of these statistics for those features. So let's find one that's fully inside here. And I can see that the minimum elevation is 100 and the maximum elevation is 152, and some other information about all this. If I zoomed in, I could kind of do some identify tool work and validate that, but I trust it since I've used this tool so many times before. We could take a look and see that, oh yeah, the minimum's down here, but the maximum is going to be up a little higher here. So this is really handy because now I can have any metrics I want from a raster as values attached to my feature data. Now remember, because this is a join in my map document, it's not permanent. And if I wanted to make it permanent, I need to right click, go to data and export data, and then save it out somewhere as census places with elevation. And that way I will have it as a permanent set of information on the features. And I realized I just made a mistake and I only exported the selected feature. Maybe some of you caught that. But it'll still show that in the attribute table, we have all of that information appended permanently. So that's the Zonal Stats tool. I think it's one of the best tools in the toolbox. And like I've said before, it's kind of like the spatial join of raster to vector, where take our raster data and take some representation of it and join it back over to our vector data as field information. It's a very valuable tool, and it's going to be one of those common manipulations you need if you have workflows that work across raster and vector data. Okay, that's it for this lecture. In this lecture, I showed you the Zonal Statistics as Table tool. It's one of the most important tools you'll know, and I think you'll find it very useful in attaching data from your rasters back to your vector data as fields. See you next time.